President, like most Americans, I also believe the right to bear arms must be balanced with the right of all little boys and girls in this country, whether they live in inner city Chicago or sleepy Newtown, Connecticut, to grow up safe from the threat of gun violence. Most gun owners are good. The vast, vast majority of gun owners are good, responsible people who love target shooting and hunting, want to protect their homes and their families. But, Mr. President, we have a responsibility to do everything in our power to keep guns out of the hands of convicted criminals and those who suffer from mental illnesses that make them a danger to themselves and to others. And we understand that now more than ever with the terrible slaughters at Aurora, Colorado, and Newtown, Connecticut. We have a responsibility as a body to safeguard our most vulnerable and most precious resource, our kids, our children, our babies. And the terrible tragedy at Newtown was a wake-up call. Mr. President, we are really failing. We need to do more. Newtown will always remember those little boys and girls. Some of them shot multiple times. Little children, 5-year-old kids, 6-year-old children. Now, they're just names to us. But the people in Newtown, Olivia isn't just a name. Olivia is a little girl that had family that loved her, and they knew it's a little town, relatively speaking. Noah, Jack. We have a responsibility to safeguard these little kids. And unless we do something more than what's the law today, we have failed. It's long past time for a thoughtful examination of the lax laws and culture of violence that put Newtown and Aurora, Oak Creek, and Carson City, that's Carson City, Nevada, on the map for such a devastating reason. I only hope my Republican colleagues will allow us to have that conversation. Mr. President, I hope Republicans will stop trying to shut down debate and start engaging on the tough issues we were sent to Washington to tackle. Mr. President, there has been a hue and cry in this body for the 2 years plus the months of this Congress. People saying, let's have regular order. Let's have amendments. So I was relatively kind of stunned when I got a letter during our break from 13 Republican senators. They're the same senators who yell and scream the most about regular order and amendments. But in this letter to me, short, direct to the point, saying you're going to have no ability to go to the gun legislation because we're going to stop it. We don't think there should be a discussion, a debate on guns. Now, Mr. President, how would I describe these 13 senators who sent me this letter? I want to do this respectfully, because they have a right to their opinions, even if they're illogical, and even if they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth. What does that mean, speaking out of both sides of the mouth? It's very, very succinct what it means. It means that, and it's described as a verb, looking up on the internet, to say different things to different people about the same subject. That's what they've done. They have been yelling and screaming, we want regular order. The other night when we were doing the budget, it went on till 5 o'clock in the morning. One of the senators signed a letter, stood and said, we want to offer all the amendments we want to offer you. No one has a right to stop us on offering amendments. So that's what we did. But today, he feels differently. Today, he is speaking out of both sides of his mouth, saying different things to different people on the same subject. Mr. President, a former Republican congressman from Florida is now a talk show host, and he's very popular. He has a program called Morning Joe. Here's what Morning Joe is reported as having said. Scarborough tears into GOP filibuster on gun bill and says, and I quote, "Is anybody awake in my party? End of quote. Here's what he said. With 92% of Americans supporting background checks, Scarborough noted, it's really hard to figure out what the political calculation is. It's a 90-10 issue that involves the massacre of 20 children. Is anybody awake in my party on the Hill? That's what Congressman Joe Scarborough said. As President Obama has said, it's impossible to prevent every senseless tragedy, but we owe it to our children to at least try. Mr. President, it's only common sense that felons who couldn't pass a background check in a gun store should be able to walk into a gun show and buy a deadly weapon. This is not hyperbole. 40% of the guns sold in the United States each year, including many used to commit crimes, are sold legally at gun shows or through private sales without even the most basic background check. 3 years ago, one of those guns, a shotgun, purchased legally without a background check during a 2008 gun show in Kingman, Arizona, about 90 miles from Las Vegas, was used to devastate the largest courthouse we have in Nevada, brand new Lloyd D. George Federal Courthouse in Las Vegas. And it happened just as prospective jurors were arriving for the day. This man walked in and started shooting. He blasted every place that only a shotgun can do. He killed Stanley Cooper of Sandy Valley, who was a security guard. He was killed instantly. This hail of buckshot going around the courthouse. He ran after his gun became empty to reload, and he was eventually killed. That is the man that caused all this carnage. But Stanley Cooper, this good man who was there, left behind a brother, 4 sons, a daughter, 7 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren. He loved to spend time with his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. He loved horses and spending time outdoors. That's why he lived in Sandy Valley. He was no stranger to guns. He spent 26 years serving his community as a Las Vegas Metropolitan Police officer. The man who shot him, on the other hand, was a convicted felon with no right to carry a firearm. He certainly couldn't have passed a criminal background check, but the shooter never had to get one. He just went to one of these gun shows and bought this shotgun. Same basic shotgun that I got when I was a 12-year-old. Requiring a simple background check every time a gun is sold is common sense. Mr. President, as a brand new member of the Nevada State Legislature, I was a kid. But Sheriff Lamb, who was sheriff of Clark County at the time, and now they have a TV program on him, Dennis Quaid is playing Ralph Lamb. He came to me and he said, I need to do something because we need people to wait a little while before they purchase a handgun. And I went to the legislature, not really understanding the process totally, but I introduced legislation that passed and became the law. That in Nevada, if you purchase a handgun, you have to wait 3 days to pick it up. And it's believed that alone has saved the lives of many people. Sometimes people, in a fit of passion, will purchase a handgun to do bad things with it. Mr. President, even as my dad did, kill themselves. Waiting a few days helps. Requiring a simple background check every time a gun is sold is common sense. Now, we're not asking for a 3-day waiting period. We have technology now that doesn't take that long. But, Mr. President, it's common sense. That's why more than 90% of Americans, including the vast majority of gun owners, the majority of people who belong to the NRA, support our proposal to keep guns out of the hands of criminals and those with mental illnesses. That's what universal background check, that's what it's all about. This legislation would also crack down on anyone who buys a gun as part of a scheme to funnel it to criminals, reducing violent crime and protecting police officers. The 3 things that are in the bill that's now before this body All were reported out of the Judiciary Committee led by Pat Leahy. Now, if anyone thinks that Pat Leahy is a wimp on guns, they've got another thought coming. He's from the state of Vermont. He boasts about a gun he has. He has a .50 caliber gun. I don't know why he wants one, but he's got one. He is a man who loves to shoot his guns. So this bill is reported out of the Judiciary Committee led by one of the people who knows about as much about guns as many people in this body, and more, I should say. This bill that came out of that committee gives schools across the country the resources to improve security and keep kids safe. It's called school safety. It's got federal trafficking in it. This legislation won't prevent every crime, especially those awful crimes. And background checks won't keep guns out of the hands of every violent madman. And we all know that. But we owe it to the American people to act as if there's a chance to save even one life, whether that life belongs to great-grandfather like Stanley Cooper, or these babies who barely began to live in Newtown, Connecticut. Mr. President, they deserve a vote.
Or a domestic abuser will be held accountable. That's why law enforcement say, pass this bill. Give those of us in law enforcement on the front lines, give us the tools we need. Now, some have expressed frustration about the level of prosecution under existing gun laws. Some have suggested instead of making sensible changes to our public safety laws to prevent gun violence, federal law enforcement officials should focus exclusively on existing laws. Now, I share some of that frustration, but it's not a valid excuse to do nothing. Improvements in the enforcement of existing laws, efforts to give law enforcement officials better tools to do their jobs, these are not mutually exclusive. These are efforts that complement each other. A recent article in the Washington Times documented that gun prosecutions were in decline beginning in the Bush administration, and suggests having a Senate-confirmed director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives would significantly help law enforcement. And I ask that a copy of the article be included in the record, the conclusion of my statement.
Without objection.
You know, as I said in January, America's looking to us for solutions for action, not sloganeering, demagoguery, partisanship. That's why it's particularly disappointing. Here, some senators are pledging to prevent Senate consideration of these proposals by filibustering. It's especially disappointing to some who claim to support regular order, a transparent legislative process, accord that process no deference. You know, Mr. President, there are only 100 of us who have the privilege to serve at any given time in this wonderful body. We represent 325 million Americans. How can we talk to those Americans and say, we won't even vote? We won't even vote. We won't let it come to a vote. We don't have the guts to stand up and vote yes or no. We want to vote maybe. Tell that to the families in Newtown, Connecticut. Tell that to the families in Aurora, Colorado. Tell that the people in the United States Senate are not willing to stand up and vote either yes or no. They want to vote maybe. Mr. President, I'm a gun owner. I'm going to say with a lot of gun owners, I've got the courage to stand here and vote. I want to vote. Some will agree with my votes, some will disagree. But this senator feels it's part of his sworn duty to vote. Vote yes, vote no, but vote. In the Judiciary Committee, we held 3 public hearings and 4 public markups on this legislation. We gave them full and fair consideration. We debated and considered amendments. Democrats and Republicans, the distinguished presiding officer is a member of that committee. He knows the debate we had and the votes we held. What a filibuster would do now is obstruct the open process of Senate consideration of gun violence prevention legislation. And it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. It demeans the United States Senate, and it turns our back on 325 million Americans who expect better. So I've worked, Senator Collins and others, to provide a real-world, common-sense solution to the problem of gun trafficking and straw purchasing. Of course, I urge the Senate to take. Let's go forward. Vote. Vote yes. Vote no. But vote. But vote. Have the courage to vote. Don't turn our back on the families who've suffered so much. Mr. President, I ask my full statement to be made part of the record.
Without objection.